It's based on what they want to do, because it's not us, it's them that know what they need to revitalize their languages.
Tonight, Canada begins its work to help bring back languages it once outlawed.
I want to know that the minister's going to come here, he's going to see for himself.
A first-hand look at the state of emergency at Cat Lake First Nation.
It just struck me that she was really bright and had her sort of like, it seemed like a full life ahead of her.
And why a health center may help those who are most vulnerable and left to on the streets to fend for themselves. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgen. The federal government tabled its Indigenous Languages Bill this morning in the House of Commons. They say Bill C-91 is supposed to protect and revitalize Indigenous languages.
As APTN's Todd Lamoran reports, the day began in Parliament with the Prime Minister championing this legislation.
We worked on with Indigenous peoples. It's a way to strengthen their culture, recognize their identity, their language, and make sure that we're strengthening it for years to come.
The official announcement came a few hours later from Canadian Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez, flanked by AFN National Chief Perry Bellegarde and Métis Nation of BC President Clara Morin-Delcol.
We're committed to long-term and stable funding, and it's also flexible because it will be able to adapt to the needs of the different regions and groups. It's based on what they want to do, because it's not us, it's them that know what they need to revitalize their languages.
Bellegarde and Delcol welcomed the legislation.
We have over 90 Indigenous languages, and they're all at different levels. None of them are safe.
We're losing languages every single day, and this will help revitalize our Michif language, all our Indigenous languages. So
they both downplayed the lack of specific dollars attached to language revitalization. For Bellegarde, it's more important how Bill C-91 makes language rights a constitutional right.
So that's a very, very powerful piece in this legislation. So this piece of legislation is filling up Section 35 for language rights to be there. And if they're language, they're constitutional rights. They're inherent rights, they're constitutional rights. They should be adequately resourced.
Also announced was the intention to create a Commissioner's Office on Indigenous languages.
Is to monitor how things are going and to report and make sure that we have recommendations to improve the situation.
Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami President Natan Obed was not impressed. He sat in the crowd, not taking the stage with his counterparts. The Inuit were not adequately consulted, he said. And Bill C-91 doesn't put Inuktitut on the same level as French and English. But Minister Rodriguez does not see the proposed legislation as set in stone yet.
Can we then amend it and bring other stuff in it? Absolutely, but we have to start somewhere, and this is where we're starting, and this is fundamental.
The House starts debate on the legislation tomorrow. Todd Lamoran, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Cat Lake First Nation recently declared a state of emergency due to its housing conditions. Today, NDP MP Charlie Angus and MPP Saul Mamakwa visited the community. Leaders say they've inspected more than 100 houses, all of them showing signs of mold and structural issues. Health, skin, and respiratory conditions are all major concerns for Cat Lake citizens, with some cases so bad that parents are keeping their kids home from school because they're being bullied for their skin conditions, and elders are dying from respiratory illnesses. Angus and Mamakwa visited some of the homes infested with mold. Meanwhile, the Minister of Indigenous Services released a statement saying they're committed to immediate housing projects and repairs, but gave no timelines or dollar amounts. Angus said the minister needs to see for himself.
This is a massive health crisis, and people are literally dying here. A little child was medevaced out in the middle of our meeting. We just had one medevaced out last week. I want to know that the minister is going to come here, he's going to see for himself, and he's going to feel it in his bones, what it's like to live in a house like this, and he's going to know.
Winnipeg is trying to turn a new leaf and tackle racism in the city that has Canada's largest urban Indigenous population. A new initiative invites Winnipeggers to share their stories and be part of determining how the city will move forward in reconciling its history. Ashley Branson has more on this new initiative.
Reconciliation is hard work. It requires a willingness to educate ourselves, to embrace change, and to rebuild the mutual trust that began with the treaties.
This is the promotional video for the City of Winnipeg's new initiative, Welcoming Winnipeg, Reconciling Our History. The initiative is to re-examine historical markers and place names to resolve the absence of Indigenous perspectives, experiences, and contributions in the stories remembered and commemorated in Canadian cities. At a press release, Winnipeg Mayor Brian Bowman says listening to Winnipeggers will help develop a process to guide how the city remembers various historical people and events.
It's an engagement effort that will challenge Winnipeggers to examine our history and where it has led our city. It will challenge everyone involved to hear, to learn, and respect the views of all of our residents as we decide where our city is headed in the future.
The city says this is just one aspect of the reconciliation process they're committed to. They add this will help ensure perspectives of Indigenous peoples are reflected truthfully in Winnipeg's stories, markers, and names. Former MKO Grand Chief Sheila North, who now works for the College of the North, watched the video and says this is a step in the right direction.
I think it's constructive to get everyone that wants to be involved, and I think it's wise to invite people for their participation, but also, of course, being mindful that not everyone is going to have positive comments or positive feedback, but you have to take the good with the bad in order to move forward.
She says acknowledging and getting Indigenous people involved is important for widespread support.
It would be great to see the city plastered with recognition of Indigenous people of this part of Canada, but not just this city, but all of the urban centres in Manitoba, including in the north.
North says she sees different provinces acknowledging the existence of Indigenous people through signs and public spaces, but in Manitoba, she says we don't see much of that yet.
I think we need to do more, and it's about time that we're seeing these kind of initiatives coming forward.
Ashley Branson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
On Monday in a British Columbia provincial courtroom, Curtis Wayne Sag-Moin pleaded guilty to assault. He was given a sentence that includes time already served for a crime against a sex trade worker in 2013. APTN's Tina House joins along with Angela Marie McDougall, who has been following this case very closely.
Joining me today is Angela Marie McDougall from the Battered Women's Support Services. Angela, thanks for joining us today. What can you tell us about what happened in court yesterday with Curtis Wayne Sag-Moin?
Well, we saw a lot of back and forth with the Crown Prosecutor and the defense attorney. They were clearly making a deal. And what we found out was that they did actually come up with a deal, and that was that he would plead guilty to a lesser charge. He had been charged with assault, aggravated assault, which is an indictable offense, and he pled guilty to simple assault, which is a summary offense. And he then he pled guilty, then he was sentenced to 30 days, which was basically time served. As well as 24 months probation. So this was he pled to a far lesser crime under the criminal code and time served. However, he still stays in custody because there are several other violent offenses for which he's been charged.
Do you feel that this was somewhat of a slap on the wrist because of somebody that's shown so much violence against women?
Yeah, it makes us wonder certainly about the limitations of the Canadian legal system, to what extent it can or cannot actually address violent crime against women, and particularly women that are deemed vulnerable. And women such as sex workers, which seems to be who he's doing violence toward. And so it's very concerning, certainly, that the Crown Prosecutor was content to make this plea deal. I think it tells us very clearly that they are not caring about women's safety in the broad sense and not wanting to use the legal system in that way.
Absolutely. And he has his next court appearance on February the 11th?
He does, and we're going to be there. He have a court appearance in Vernon, British Columbia, and we're going to be there because we want to continue showing the criminal system and Curtis Sag-Moin that we're not done. He's charged with not only 2 more assaults on another sex worker, and that he'll do his first appearance on that on February 11th. And then there's actually another series of charges and yet another sex worker, and those dates will be upcoming as well.
Thanks for your time today. Back to you in studio.
A video of a security guard slamming and handcuffing a youth in Thunder Bay has a huge corporation issuing an apology.
That and more still to come, but first here's a look at Wednesday's weather forecast.
Starting on the east coast, -3 for Halifax with snow, sunny, and -9 in Charlottetown. 19 below under sunny skies for Nain, -12 in Cartwright. -8 with showers in Montreal, -12 in Saguenay, 0 for London, +1 in Sarnia and Windsor, -13 for Thunder Bay and Wawa, -17 in Sioux Lookout, 27 below for Thompson, 29 below under sunny skies in Puckatawagan, -19 with snow for Winnipeg and Gimli. Over to Saskatchewan, -23 and sunny skies for North Battleford and Saskatoon. -23 as well in Meadow Lake, -30 for Stony Rapids and Uranium City.
Welcome back. We have breaking news on a deadly train derailment at the Alberta-British Columbia border. The Transportation Safety Board says the train had been parked on a hill for 2 hours then started rolling away on its own. Officials have still not determined exactly how fast the train was traveling, and a crew had just boarded but weren't yet ready to leave. 3 crew members were killed when the train plunged into the water.
Our investigation will progress, and we will look for every indication of how that train was handled going down the hill.
Police in Thunder Bay are investigating, and Canada's largest food retailer is apologizing after a video surfaced of a teen being slammed to the ground and handcuffed.
The incident took place at the Shoppers Drug Mart on Memorial Avenue in Thunder Bay on Sunday. The video, which has since been removed by the original poster, appears to show a security guard restraining the teen. In the video, the teen is picked up and slammed to the ground and then handcuffed. In an email statement, Loblaw, the parent company of Shoppers, said, quote, "This is an absolutely unacceptable incident, and we are deeply concerned by what happened. Shoppers Drug Mart has a no-touch policy. Working with our pharmacy owner, we have been in contact with a third-party security provider and have recommended disciplinary action, including restricting the security guard from working at any of our stores. We sincerely apologize to the family for what happened." End quote. Thunder Bay police say they were dispatched to the business for a report of a theft. Investigators are aware of the video circulating social media, believed to be connected with this call, and say they are investigating the entirety of the incident. A friend of the family APTN has spoken with says the family is from Kingfisher First Nation, a Northern Ontario flying community, and is in Thunder Bay to access medical services.
After 3 homeless and vulnerable Indigenous women died in Montreal in January, people have been calling for more services. A collection of Indigenous frontline workers are hoping that Aboriginal Health Centre could be part of that solution. Tom Fenario has more.
2 years ago, the Open Door Shelter started a memorial wall for clients who have passed away.
This is the memorial wall.
Yep.
I noticed before it was over there, but I guess now you need more space.
We realize we need more space, and you know, if things don't change, we're going to need more space still.
The need for more wall space for memorial photos comes after a deadly January where 3 Indigenous women who frequented this shelter died. As the director of the Open Door Shelter, David Chapman knew them well.
It's, you know, you know, like, it's been a heavy month.
Crystal Ignish was a Cree woman in her 20s from Iuichti, Cree territory in Quebec. She died after drinking too much alcohol.
It just struck me that she was really bright and had her sort of like, it seemed like a full life ahead of her. She was talking to me a bit about her son and how she loved her son, and to be honest, I was just completely shocked when I heard only 2 days later that she was no longer with us.
Chapman says that substance abuse also played a role in the deaths of the other women, but when they were alive and wanted help, it wasn't available.
Connie asked 3 times to go to detox and rehab, and a number of efforts were made, but each time there was a waiting list. And you often have a very short window of time where there is a desire to go forward with detox and rehab, and if you miss that window, then you're back to square one.
Harvey Michel is the interim president of the Indigenous Health Centre of Tiohtià:ke. Tiohtià:ke is the Mohawk word for Montreal, and Michel says the city is lacking compared to Canada's other major cities. Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver all have centres devoted to Indigenous health.
We're, let's say, 20 years behind from other provinces where they are more specifically targeting Indigenous health.
Incorporated in 2016, the health centre is still in its infancy. Their goal is to eventually establish a place where Indigenous people can get health services, including culturally adapted services for substance abuse and mental health issues.
The underserviced Indigenous community, the need is great.
Michelle says the health centre is a part of the larger conglomeration of Indigenous organizations called the Health Services Partnership Table for Urban Indigenous Persons. The Ojibwe man explains that together they are gearing up to push for funding. But establishing an Indigenous health centre will take years. In the meantime, Michelle would like to see more funds for health navigators, people who are paid specifically to help vulnerable folks navigate the health system. The health centre currently has 2 on staff.
The roles and the responsibilities are to assist, I guess, community members to go through the barriers.
For David Chapman, it comes down to keeping more photos from going up on the Open Door Memorial Wall.
In this case, there is very much a direct link between, funding recovery and span of life.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
Over the last few days, Guardians from the Northwest Territories have been learning from their counterparts in Australia. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs explains some of the Aussie successes that Northerners hope to replicate.
They might not share the same landscapes as Dene people, but these Indigenous Australian Rangers do share a lot of similarities in their value of respecting land. Australian Rangers are in Yellowknife sharing tips on how to establish Indigenous protected areas with Dene Guardians.
State governments, for example, who initially, 20 years ago, were fairly reluctant to support the IPA program, but I've seen a great turnaround in that today. I think it's about two-way learning. We've got a lot as a traditional owner group or Indigenous group, a lot to learn off, from the Western science point of view, and the reverse applies.
Dennis Rose says he hopes the meetings help Indigenous Northerners ensure a healthy future for their land.
Well, I think climate change is certainly something that, again, from our point of view, that we have a very healthy water regime in providing on country. But in 20 or 30 years' time, we might be the only healthy river left, and there might be some fights for that country. So we've got to make sure that we do as best protection we can now and into the future.
Australia has reached its commitment to protect 17% of its lands by 2020. David Ross says as Indigenous people gain more legal right to their land, programs must be in place to reconnect.
There's no point in having land rights if you can't enjoy them. You win the land back, but what do you do? So, people want to enjoy their land rights after they've fought long, hard struggles to win their land, and by being out and learning to manage that country, both from a non-Aboriginal point of view and from the Aboriginal point of view.
We're hoping that this program is something that can help address that.
Members from the Saw-Two
it's given us a lot of pride.
And Dechel region, along with Guardians from Litzelke, shared what they have already done. While the NWT has been hard at work, overall Canada sits at less than 11% for protected lands. Both the people of Denendeh and Australia hope meetings like this will further land protection. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Some big news in the Moose Wars. We'll tell you about that after the break.
Can't wait, but first, here's the rest of tomorrow's weather forecasts.
Picking back up in northern Alberta, sunny but chilly, minus 29 for Peace River and Fort Chipewyan, minus 23 for Red Deer, minus 20 in Calgary, 0 and sunny skies for Vancouver, plus 2 under the sun in Campbell River, minus 24 in Fort Nelson, 11 below for Smithers, minus 24 in Old Crow, 14 below for Whitehorse, minus 27 for Norman Wells, minus 31 in Yellowknife, 24 below for Sax Harbor, minus 32 in Colville Lake, minus 27 for Baker Lake and Chesterfield, 31 below in Cambridge Bay, minus 30 for Resolute, minus 26 in Iqaluit.
Welcome back. A university hockey brawl that prompted an investigation and will likely lead to a number of suspensions may have started with a derogatory comment directed at a sexual assault survivor. That's according to a statement from St. Francis Xavier University.
Unbelievable. I've never seen this in 30 years of covering hockey.
This is the fight that broke out in the third period of the game between St. Francis Xavier and Acadia last Saturday night in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. It led to the ejection of 5 Acadian players, 8 from St. Francis, and both head coaches. Centerman Sam Studnicka was the target of the comment. He issued a statement saying sexual assault is a very serious issue, and there's simply no place for shaming sexual assault survivors.
An ongoing debate over the world's tallest moose sculpture might see a Norwegian mayor travel all the way to Saskatchewan to call a truce. The dispute began when residents in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, found out that the Norwegian town of Storeldal's moose sculpture was 30 centimeters taller than theirs. They began raising money to boost the height of their sculpture. Linda Henriksen, the deputy mayor of the Norwegian town, says the two cities should share the title.
And then they're going to show up at Moose Jaw and find out they spent the money to make that moose taller, and it's just going to be...
Well, I'm thinking, isn't it illegal to share moose? So how can you share the biggest moose title, right?
I don't think they should share that title. They raised tens of thousands of dollars to make this sculpture taller, so I think it should be the surprise when the Norwegian mayor gets here that we actually did make it taller. Hey, that's your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca.
And tune in tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for In Focus. That's where we're going to wrap up our 3-part series looking into the child welfare system. I'm Melissa Ridge, and have a great night.
And I'm Dennis Ward. Stick around. The Laughing Drum with Tim Fontaine is next. Have a great night.